from IDA. This is Janet Street with IDA Georgia. IDA's mission is to create a future for all individuals who struggle with dyslexia and other related reading differences so they may have a richer, more robust life and access to the tools and resources they needed. I'm Janet Street. I'm an Orton Gillingham Fellow, and I train teachers to use structured literacy through Smart Street Educational Consulting. I'm also a member of the IDA Georgia Board, and I will be your host tonight. Please know that you are able to submit questions via the chat or the Q&A that you see at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to address those at the end. So tonight, our guest is Derrick McCollum. Derrick is a psychotherapist who works with individuals and couples and families. He is in his final year, God bless him, of a PhD in advanced clinical supervision and trauma-informed care. You can see his websites at marriagemenders.org and elitementalhealthservices.org. So tonight, Derrick is with us because he wants to share his story about overcoming dyslexia. So welcome, Derrick.
Hi, Janet. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. The first thing that we should do is kind of get the audience acquainted with your story. So tell us a little bit about what it was like for you growing up with dyslexia and like what was school like?
Well, it's interesting. As I think back, I didn't know I had dyslexia. And so growing up in my home, grew up in a home where it was a loving home, but then my dad, he lost his job and then he started to act out towards my mom. So it became kind of toxic for my mom and myself and my brother. And so went to high school, graduated from high school. In that time frame from middle school to high school, I realized that something wasn't right. And that's the only term that I can put, meaning that teachers asked me to go to the board and I didn't want to go to the board, so I acted out. I was involved in sports, so I made sports my out, my escape, so not to be in class. I found myself being wanting to be by myself. I didn't want to talk as much. I didn't want to read as much. I didn't want to do math as much. And I just thought that it was part of growing up and being an athlete. And my mom was an educator. And so, she made sure that we went to school and got the education that we were supposed to have. But I knew something wasn't feeling right for me academically. I made it through high school, graduated, average student, nothing, no bells or whistles, anything like that. When I wanted to go to college and I took the SATs, and the numbers were probably the lowest number that you could ever get in an SAT. I don't know what that number is. And at that point, I felt inadequate. I felt like I wasn't academically able to be in a classroom setting or learn. And so I grew up in a family where there was military and law enforcement. That was the options for us, even though I wanted to go to college. And so went to the Marine Corps. And in the Marine Corps, it's pretty much, what the Marine Corps does, very little academics, but you did have to go to classes. I kind of fudged through that. No one asked you to go up to a board to read. It was just read independently and get it done at this time. So my academics wasn't challenged then, so it wasn't a major issue. But then as I developed and got out the Marine Corps, I went to law enforcement, which I excelled at, became a detective. I excelled at that because it didn't require me to do too much of academic information. It was more so investigations, it was more so research on different suspects, responding to calls. So I still wasn't challenged. So my education, my middle school, probably elementary school, middle school, and high school, it stopped in that space, meaning I didn't have to question what was wrong with me because I didn't have to be challenged with it. It wasn't until I met my dear wife. And then that's when things happened.
I want to ask you something about that. So at this point, how much are you able to read? I mean, I would assume that you're able to read a lot more now being in a PhD program,
Right.
that you acquired these skills along the way. But at the point, like you got through high school, how well could you read at that point?
We're talking back in the late 70s, early 80s. And so I was able to read proficiently on my level, but to me, right? But
Mhm.
if the teacher, if I had to go back and ask my high school teachers how well did he do in his reading, they probably would say he had challenges. But
Gotcha.
it wasn't observed. It wasn't, I was an athlete. And so back then I was a star football player and baseball player. So they pulled me out of class. If I had to go read something, I'm like, yes, take me out of class. So I think that to answer your question, I know my reading level was low. I knew it was low, but I didn't have anyone to say, hey, it's low.
Yeah.
I didn't have
There was
anyone to
nobody.
say, no one tested me or anything like that.
Not to mention give you some remediation to help with
Right.
it.
Exactly.
Okay, so another thought I had when you were talking about this is you immediately assumed that your choices were law enforcement and the military. And
Mhm.
that made me wonder, I wonder if other people feel like, okay, well, if my reading is getting in the way of me going to college, are those my choices? Which makes me then think, is our military, full of people who are having reading challenges? Do you
Yeah.
think that's the case, maybe?
Well, you have to take what they call an ASVAB test. So
Okay.
you have to take an aptitude test, reading, math, and so forth. And I can't remember the basics of it. But for example, my test scores weren't high enough to go into the Air Force because the Air Force had a higher standard of test scores.
Okay.
But my test scores, not saying that the Marine Corps are less adequate as far as academically, but I made it, and I don't know what my score was. I passed it to get in. So I don't know if that's a good gauge in regards to the military to say, well, people who go
Mhm.
in may not have the higher proficiency of reading or not. Um, I probably made it just through, to be honest with you, because I do remember having challenges even taking the ASVAB test.
Yeah, yeah,
But I
yeah,
think I was I was able to, my competency was high enough to pass the test.
yeah. Well, I think most of our kiddos with dyslexia get test anxiety anyway because,
Yeah,
and that's no fun. Okay,
yeah.
so now let's get to the good part. You met your wife.
So I met my wife. I always say her name is Sonia. So I met my wife, and she was a therapist. Well, she still is a therapist. When I met her, she was a therapist. So I said, God, you made sure that I married a therapist to help me with my stuff.
Yeah.
And so earlier in our marriage, we used to have all these arguments and fights and things. And this, not knowing it then, but looking back after I was diagnosed with dyslexia, it made sense of why we had these conflicts. And most of it was about communication. Most was about things that I had to read and understand that she may give me a list or communicating to me and I get it backwards. Back then we didn't have GPS. We had MapQuest.
Oh, yeah.
With those who know about MapQuest, it wasn't a GPS. You print it off and you read the
Yeah.
directions, and oh my goodness, I was unable to decipher the the information on the MapQuest. And so a lot of our arguments were in that space. And she said to me, because I acted out. So, the frustration is unable to understand the information that you're receiving. So I acted it out.
Well, and probably if you don't understand that other people are experiencing it differently,
Right.
maybe you get defensive, angry, whatever.
Right. And that's where my behaviors were communicating that I could not understand. My behaviors from frustration, my behaviors from feeling unheard and dismissed. And so I acted those behaviors out. And my wife, the therapist, says, you need to talk to someone. So I was dealing with my issues as far as the Marine Corps, the police department growing up, but it still wasn't connecting the dots to I had dyslexia
Amazing.
until our daughter comes along.
Okay, so we have a daughter. She goes to school and
Yeah, so we have four children. The daughter that we're speaking of, she's the second oldest. And so she's in middle school and she was having challenges in class, reading and in her math. And we were going to meetings and not sure, and because her response was withdrawn and disconnect. And so we went to the school, we said, okay, what's happening with our child's education? And so this wise teacher, I'll never forget her, she said, she may need to be tested for dyslexia. I said, okay, not sure what that is, but okay. I mean, I knew, but it's not, you don't know, right? We didn't know
And
back
what
then.
year is it at this point?
Sion was in middle school. So I don't know, my math, you asking a dyslexia how to do math. Now I'm not gonna be, that's the
Well,
example.
so now she's like in her 30s?
Yeah, she's 26 years old now. She's
Okay,
26
so,
now.
all right, so,
Uh,
yeah,
15 years, maybe
yeah,
20, yeah, something, 18 years, something like that. Yeah.
okay. But
Um,
certainly in a time when we knew about dyslexia, so this teacher knew about it. Interesting that she got all the way to middle school before you heard that.
right. Exactly. Exactly. And that's where some of our guilt comes in, like as parents. She had to
Mhm.
go through the time that she could read up until that age, and we missed it. Bad parents,
No,
how dare we?
no,
Well, that's how we felt then, it
sure.
was reality hit. I mean, we realized that it wasn't our fault, but that's the feeling that a lot of parents may have, like, I missed this and it's my fault. A lot of different reasons it happened. So,
It's interesting you say this because I think it's actually super common that a child gets tested, and as the psychologist is describing the child after the testing,
mhm.
psychologist is describing the child to the parents, and one or maybe both of the parents says, "Well, that was me. Oh, I get that. I do that."
Yes, absolutely. And that's what happened. The psychologist was saying after, we in that meeting, then we got referred to a psychologist. I think it's a speech pathologist, I believe. But that's what happened. I'm sitting there listening and she said, well, it's genetic, right? I said, okay, that's good information. And I'm looking at my wife, and she's looking at me, and I'm like, I don't know what she thought. It's not me because I'm Derrick McCollum. I'm almost perfect in this world, and I don't have these issues. I got my other issues,
I can
and
play baseball.
right, I can play football and baseball, right, exactly. And so I had to stop because they were going over all the different characteristics and the behaviors. I said, and that's when the light bulb hit.
Yeah,
I said, oh my goodness, that's me. I owned it, and I
yeah,
got emotional. Tears came out my eyes.
yeah,
I got emotional about it. So that's
yeah.
how it was
Well,
developed.
and emotional partially because what you said, you want to do the best you can for your kids, but
Exactly.
also just thinking back to your own schooling and how things might have been different.
Right. Exactly. If I coulda, woulda, shoulda,
Yeah,
or if someone else coulda, woulda, shoulda,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. And it's a conundrum because, this one teacher knew to say the word dyslexia, or at least to say,
Mhm.
something's not right. I think we should get some testing. But what about, I mean, she's in what, sixth grade at that point? Like, what about
Yeah,
the prior 5, 8 teachers?
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so, so hopefully we're at a place now where that's beginning to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm assuming that school was frustrating for you, frustrating for her.
Yeah. It was, and it's interesting. I had just started my associate's degree.
Oh,
And so at the same time, I was afraid to go back, and that's a whole nother story. We don't have time to unpack that space, not wanting to go, fear of going. But in that moment, it helped me to say, if that I do have dyslexia, how do I now learn in the space that I'm in? So
right,
I had to relearn or learn how to go through this process. So it was a very challenging space. So we both were going through school together. I'm in my associate's degree. She's in middle school. How do we navigate these waters, or how do I navigate these waters while still trying to care for my child,
right.
who needs my help or our help?
And she's the only one of the four, huh?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
Because yeah.
you've defied the odds because normally it's about 50%,
Yeah.
50-50 chance. That's interesting. Now, one thing you told me when we talked before this was that when you were doing your degree, you are doing your degrees
Mhm.
online, and
Mhm.
that's been a real game changer. Talk a little bit about that.
One of the things that my fear was to be in a classroom.
Mm,
because that was my fear when I was in middle school. Teachers
mm,
asked me to read, asking me questions. So that was still my fear. And so all of my coursework was online. And that was the thing that really got me through. Still able to go through the syllabus and receive the curriculum and understand the coursework, but it really worked for me because I was able to go at my own pace, and I was able to, if I made a mistake, it's my mistake and I can see it on the screen and I can go back. And sometimes, depending on the coursework, I can have accommodations. I need more time. I
yeah,
need this. So it really helped me because that way of learning for me was beneficial to how I needed to think and how I need to process information.
right. I've heard other dyslexic learners say a great thing about online learning is that if I heard something the professor or the teacher or whatever said, I can hit pause, rewind, and hear it again.
Oh my goodness.
Game changer, right?
It really, my wife and I are in school together now. She's already been to her grad degree, but I had to go, so we're doing it together. And sometimes we listen to the video. We used to do it, listen to the videos to your point, and I used to have to pause it. And she said, "Why are you pausing? Let's go through it." And but then she said, "It's your dyslexia, right? You have to do this." I said,
Mm.
"Yes." I said, "How about this? You look at it when you want to look at it. I look at it when I'm supposed to look at it, and we'll be fine." So we worked that out.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's so
Yeah.
interesting. And I'll tell you something interesting about that. Um, because I do teacher training, so I talk about dyslexia a lot. I've
Mhm.
been working in the field for about 25 years. And everybody assumes dyslexia is visual
Right.
because reading feels visual. But the
Mhm.
truth is, it's auditory. And
Exactly.
so when you said, wait a minute, I can't put it on double speed. I gotta listen to it twice.
Mhm.
You're just microseconds slower, perhaps, or less, or perhaps less accurate in your hearing
Hey,
of what's being said.
absolutely.
And so it really does help to hear it more than once.
Yeah. And the strangest thing, I have to listen to music. I know some can't. I have to listen to classical music
Mm,
to help me. It's kind of like an oxymoron, you listening to music and then reading words. But for me, it's just how my brain works. And I can focus so much on listening to Beethoven and Bach. It kind of sounds nothing else, no other music.
wow.
It's the pianos, it's the strings, it's the orchestra. It soothes my mind, and I can just go through it. I can write a 15-page journal by just listening to it. My wife's looking at me like, "You're an incredible human being."
You are. It is.
Well,
And I
yeah,
think just the realization that all of our minds have similarities, but they're also very unique
exactly. Yeah,
is I think a big aha for a lot of us. Um,
absolutely.
okay. So if you could go back, what kind of messages would you give to your school administrators? Let's start with them.
I would probably say to school administrators, your educators, your teachers are first responders.
Yeah.
I use that term because I was a first responder in law enforcement. I was a first responder in the police department. And the thing about first responders is that they train for it. That's all we did. We trained for whatever's going to happen. And so if that training is embedded, there's a term that says repetition deepens the impression. So
Mm,
if their teachers and their educators are being trained in dyslexia and understanding it and looking at the signs over and over and over again, then they'll be immediately to respond as first responders and see that 5-year-old or that 6-year-old. Wait a minute, I see it because I was trained by it. And so
right.
I would say for the administrators is continue to have their staff equipped in being first responders. Let them fall back on their training, classroom management, crisis intervention, behavior management, all those trainings, and adding that deep component of making sure that their training is always going to be there. So that's what I would say to the administrators.
So get your teachers trained. And
Hmm.
then also, like you talked a lot about um acting out. I didn't want to read out loud. I didn't want to go to the board, so I
Hmm.
misbehaved. And so, maybe also telling them, hey, if you see a child who's misbehaving, pause and think, why are they doing that? And
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
little compassion that there, it might, maybe it's dyslexia or some
Yeah.
other learning difference.
Because the behaviors are challenging, whatever the behavior is, and sometimes it's hard to take that 10-second or that 3-second or that 5-second, but whatever the time frame is, to pause and say, what is the antecedent?
Mhm.
I love that word. What is
I
the
love that
antecedent?
word too.
That's my word. When I did training in schools for crisis management, let's look at the antecedent, because if you can identify that part, then you're able to respond empathetically. You're able to respond with some compassion. And not negating the behavior or ignoring the behavior, but you're able to respond to it and say, wait a minute, that's unusual for that
Mhm,
child to behave that way. Maybe there's something else dealing with their reading or dealing with their
mhm,
comprehension. Let's
mhm.
go there first. So,
Well, and
yeah.
I like to say to kids, I know you're a good kid.
Mhm.
I know that you didn't want to act to misbehave,
Yeah.
but you know you did. So help me understand what's going on because I know
Mhm.
something's going on because you're too good a kid to want to misbehave like that. Like
And
believe in them first, you
if
know,
I would have heard that in school,
how
then
different.
that would have just been a wealth of change for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm frustrated, I'm overwhelmed, my self-image, my self-esteem is so low because I don't know what's happening. And to hear you, if you were my educator, you said that to me, I was like, oh, now, now help me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Really, any child,
Any child.
it's human behavior.
And a lot of times I will remind teachers that, you know, the first few years of school, really the main point is to learn to read. Like that's really what we're
Yeah,
working. I mean, we're working on
exactly.
math too, we're working on like how to
Mhm.
behave, you know, some basics. But really at the end of the day, a lot of it is how to read. And so if I can't do that and everybody else is, I
Mhm.
only have one conclusion to come to. I'm
Right.
stupid,
I'm stupid. Yeah.
which is ridiculous and
Yeah.
not certainly not true.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to the administrators, you're going to say, get your teachers trained, you know, support them. What about to the teachers? What would you say to the teachers if you could
Uh,
talk to them?
if I could talk to the teachers, um, I would say to the teachers, uh, self-reflection for where you are as an educator, because I understand educator is overwhelming. There's a lot to do, lesson plans and meetings and deadlines and responsibility parent meetings and there's IEP meetings and all these meetings and it's overwhelming to even just now to teach the children to 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 take a deep breath in their self-care. Let's just start with the
Mm,
self-care. I'm a therapist, so that's where I go, when people are overwhelmed and stressed, to self-reflect on where they are emotionally and mentally. If they're burned out, hey, I'm burned out, Mr.
mm,
Principal, Miss Principal. I need time. And once you go through that beginning process and then take in the moment, just really take a deep breath and remind yourself your purpose of teaching.
mhm.
What is your
Yeah,
purpose of teaching?
it's hard to help anybody else if you yourself are overwhelmed.
Right, right. And then after that process, then kind of take your deep breath in the moment, count to 10, woosah in the moment, and then continue to say, if my student is acting out and it's unusual or it's different, or this is not their norm, it may be other variables, it may be other factors, but add
Mhm,
to your component that they may be dealing with dyslexia. They may
mhm.
be dealing with something that's dealing with their reading or their comprehension. So just kind of add that to their wealth of knowledge. And that's what I would say to the teachers.
Well, yeah, and the good news about dyslexia is, you know, there's a lot we can do to help. I mean,
Absolutely.
so there's a lot of research out there and we kind of know what to do. But as an educator, maybe you don't know, but maybe you can find out. You know,
Absolutely.
there's the Georgia Department of Education has fantastic resources. They have a whole dyslexia handbook
Hmm.
that is great for parents and teachers. So, you know, there's good stuff out there on the Good O website.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Um, how about students? What would you want students to know? Like, what would you say to them if the ones who are feeling like they might be dyslexic?
To identify the feelings of what they're feeling in that moment, me as a student with dyslexia, that's a long time ago, but even still, I'm still a student, and the feelings that come with when you're trying to comprehend something, there's feelings that go along with it. Overwhelmed, confused, afraid. So being able to say those feelings, identify those feelings, and then being able to express to someone in their life that they can try to teach her, hey, I'm overwhelmed, or a parent or someone, identify the feeling that you're experiencing and then share it, and then add to the component of why you're feeling that way. And I think that's the piece that's important, because a lot of children they have the feelings inside, but they don't know how to, if it's a safe place to say how they feel about it.
Right, right.
So it's really to take that space where they are, and for some it may be difficult to identify feelings in that moment, but at least identify and express it to someone about how they're feeling, where they are.
Because like you said, a lot of times parents and teachers don't know. They just
Right.
don't know that you're struggling. And
Exactly.
advocating for yourself is hard.
Hmm.
Kids, I don't think it's natural for them. I think that's something that has to be taught.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that's students. What about parents? What would you say to parents to maybe help them?
Yeah. Educate yourself, I'll speak on behalf of a parent. And
Mhm.
so the one thing that we had to do is we had to educate ourselves, there's so much information, like you said, that's available. IDA Georgia has so much information. And I looked at it, I said, I wish the IDA Georgia was in Philadelphia, because that information is a wealth of good information. So being able to look and find resources and support, sometimes you can feel alone. So those resources are important to go into. And so that's what I say to the parents, fight for your child. And
Right.
especially if looking at this segment and hearing it, don't hesitate. Go and go on the website IDA Georgia and go and say, okay, this fits me, and these things help me. So that's one thing I would say, is to advocate for your children by getting the information and the help for you, so you can advocate at a high level. You should Parents should know more than the administrator. They should know more than the speech pathologist or the psychologist, or they should know more. So when they come and present, oh, let me tell you the 4 types of dyslexia in my child, and I understand what this is, and so I need you to connect with me, and based on what I've read online, give me the resource so we can work together. So that's what I would say to the parents.
Because you said that, I'm just gonna share for a second the IDA Georgia website page. It's ga.dyslexiaida.org. And there's a tab right here for parents. Here's the
Mm.
Georgia
There
Department
you
of
go.
Education Dyslexia Handbook. Here's dyslexia at a glance. Here's advocating for your child, fact sheets. I mean, you're right. There are a ton of resources out here, you know, um,
Yeah.
and of course, we have events. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
only saying this because I think it might be helpful to people to know this, but
Yeah.
we have an event next week with teenagers who we have an IDA teen board, and
Hmm.
all these teens are dyslexic, and they're gonna have a little webinar next Tuesday at 7 p.m. November 12th, and they're going to talk about what their experience has been. I think sometimes hearing it from another child is very different
Yes.
from hearing it from your parents too.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I'll just add one more thing for parents,
Yeah,
it's a tool. Ask open-ended questions. I mean, we do, like, how was your day? And I had teens. It was good,
fine.
fine, and they keep moving. And then you say, well, what made it fine? Tell me something significant today. I did it with my son about 20 minutes ago. He's 16 years old. How was your day, son? I do it all the time. He's like, okay, I'm in the house with a bunch of therapists. But I asked these questions, and he said, well, this is what I did today. Oh, but that information gives us information. So if he said, I was in class and I wasn't paying attention. Okay, well, a cue for me.
Mhm.
Maybe nothing shattering, but let me go back and ask some more probing questions. So that's one thing I would add as far as
Mhm.
a tool to use
Yeah.
with their child.
I can't say I did this myself, but I used to think it was so smart when parents would say, let's do highs and lows. What was your high today and what was your low?
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
boy, you can learn a lot from that. You
Oh, we do that every Friday, believe it or not. Well, the kids are grown now. We used to. I wish your highs and lows.
That's good.
You
I
get so
like
much information from that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that people with dyslexia have strengths, certain strengths that maybe the rest of us don't have. So, how do you feel about that? What would you say yours are? I mean, baseball and football, obviously. You don't have
I
strengths.
don't think I can get on the field now, but yes, those are my strengths. I'm going to stick to living in the past for a minute. I think that once I understood the my challenges, I'm not going to say weaknesses. Once I understood the challenges that I had to restructure my thinking. You know, in therapy, we call it cognitive behavior thinking or cognitive distortions, and we have to restructure what we think. And my strengths, I'm focused and I'm very detail oriented. And I said before, repetition deepens the impression. Everything is repetition. So
Hmm.
that's my strength. I share with you, I use headphones when I have to really study and focus. Uh, Perseverance is my strength. If
Mm.
I'm in a moment where I'm getting overwhelmed, my daughter and I, we call it a dyslexia moment. I was hanging her TV. She moved into an apartment. I was hanging her TV. We had to read the instructions, right? So both
Yeah,
of us, we both were doing it. And I said, and so we laughed. You know, we both said it. We're having a dyslexia moment, and
yeah.
so we have empathy. We have empathy, a high level empathy for others. And my strength is also not afraid to ask for help.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah,
So you
that
do stop for directions.
say again.
You do stop for directions when you're lost.
Oh, absolutely. I'm okay with that. Oh, yes. I mean, we have GPS now, but sometimes it's not going to be effective. I will pull over and say, and when I ask for it, I said, you need to write it down for me. I
Mm,
have to use symbols. I have to use the line and the tree on the left and the stop sign and the corner store, and I have to look at that. Excuse me, that part. So yes, I do ask for directions if needed. And even communicating with handling business information. You know, we have our own business, and so there's some things that my wife has to do because it's overwhelming for me when someone communicates to me. I say, honey, you know, you need to go ahead and take this information because it's
yeah,
overwhelming for me.
yeah. You know, there are things that are very easy for one person
Yeah.
and they don't realize what a gift it is. You know,
Mhm.
if there's something that's very easy for your wife, I know there are things that you do for her that are very easy for you and
Exactly.
not so much for her. And so when you have that gift, you take it for granted. You don't even think of it as a gift. But the
Hmm.
person who doesn't have the gift is very aware of it. Um,
Absolutely.
I know note taking is one of those things for kids. Like, you know, it can be very hard to listen to the teacher and take notes at
Hmm.
the same time. And so I know a lot of dyslexic kids that I've taught will say, "Hey, can I have your notes? Can I pay you
Right.
for your notes? Can I whatever?" And the
Hmm.
other student is like, "You can just have them. Like it's no big deal. You know, like
Exactly.
this is easy."
Exactly. You're so right. You know, you can't see where I'm sitting. We have a dual, we sit next to each other, my wife and I. I have a bunch of sticky notes. They're different colors. And that's how I have to function. My wife doesn't need sticky notes. She's free spirit. She can just go off, but she understands that's what I'm living with and I'm okay with it, but I have to function. And so to your question, those are my accommodations for me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
And it
yeah.
sounds like you're not afraid to ask for what you need, which is huge.
No, it really is. My clients, you know, they say, well, I want to set an appointment with you now. And I say, no, 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 we're not going to do that. You have to go online. And so I can, make the appointment. And I tell them, I say, your therapist, some therapists say we don't have to, self-disclosure, but I think it's important so that I'm a human. And
Yeah.
this is where I am. I'm not hiding this. It doesn't impede my skill level or my able to help people. But no, you can't. write me a note or send me a text. You have to send it through the computer, hit the button, and I can see it pop up, and my appointment is there, and I'll show up for the appointment. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not afraid to say, hey, I'm living with this.
I actually think that's great modeling. Like, I don't have to be perfect to be
Right.
wonderful. And I'm going to show you that I'm
Excellent.
not perfect. And
Absolutely.
by the way, none of us are, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what else, what other kinds of things do you want people to know that we haven't maybe touched on?
Um, you know, because I'm a therapist, I have to go there for about a minute. It's a term called co-occurring conditions. So this because if someone has dyslexia, that doesn't mean that they're depression, have anxiety. It doesn't mean that. But
Mhm.
what it does mean is that if it's not treated and it's not diagnosed, then it can develop into that. Because what
Yeah,
happens is that if I'm feeling, uh, you know, dumb or not intelligent or inadequate or all these
right.
feelings, and if it's not diagnosed and it's not treated, then it can go into the realm of no one cares about me.
Yeah,
I'm worthless. And then they may have anxiety on things that they should be able to do healthy and they're not able to do. So it's just important to the testing that they have now, you know, up until the 5 years old, that making sure that these children are being tested for dyslexia, and
yeah,
even older, being able to treat it and to diagnose it so that it doesn't morph into something else that has to be dealt with or treated. And what happens is that, now I'm looking at someone who has depression and anxiety, but the reality is that it's dyslexia.
mhm, wow.
And I added that to my practices where I had a client come in and he was telling his story. He says, I come in and I'm dealing with some heavy things. I may have depression. I said, well, okay, you may have depression. I have to do assessments for that. I said, tell me your story. And when they tell me, I said, tell me your story and go into your school, like you asked me, tell me about your education, your school. And when they start going into that arena, well, I wasn't great at school, I wasn't this, and I had some behaviors. I say, oh, light bulb for me. And then
Mhm,
I say, what I want you to do is I'm gonna give you a referral to talk to a speech pathologist or a psychologist or someone who can give you testing to see
mhm,
if that's a component to why you are. Because I don't
wow.
want to, I need to know if that's the component. And that's something that's been very useful for me. Because I want to make sure that people are not getting misdiagnosed. And
Yeah.
that's the challenge in my field, people who have depression. It may be life stressors and trauma and all those things, but it may be dyslexia.
Well, it's going back to the word you said earlier, antecedents.
Yes.
Maybe you're depressed now, but maybe it started because you felt
I-
inadequate because you were dyslexic, and maybe if we can fix the one, we can fix the other.
Absolutely.
Or
Absolutely.
even if we can't, quote, fix or whatever, that's probably not the right word, but at least accommodate,
Right.
and
Accommodate.
overcome. I mean, most people who get to adulthood with dyslexia have, at least on some level, have overcome, you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I know as a therapist, I love what you said to me earlier, which is, and it's okay to cry sometimes, like it's okay. You're gonna have all these feelings and
Yeah.
just don't hide from them. What good does that do?
Janet, I tell you, I'm getting emotional even thinking about it. So my wife's been out of town. She travels back and forth. I miss my wife. She's on her way back now.
Mhm.
But I was shopping at the store, Kroger, and I put my card on lock. Some of my credit cards are going lock, right? So I'm in line. I'm doing the self checkout, the conveyor belt. I have a lot of things. So it's like I have this routine, but then my card, I can't get it unlocked. But then I have to, and people are behind me, and they're looking and waiting, like, what's going on with you? And so, of course, I'm starting to get anxiety. I'm starting to think back to when I was in middle school. I'm
Yeah,
starting to think back, the pressure. I can't, I mean, I'm in school. I'm at the highest level of education right now, but I'm still going through my emotional, and it wasn't anxiety, it was my dyslexia. I was getting frustrated.
yeah, right.
And so I'm putting the card in, I finally do it, and I put it in, and I finally got everything together, and I put it in the bag. I left the item, I had to go back to get the item, I get to the car, and I just sat in the car, Janet, and I cried like a baby because I was overwhelmed because I was dealing with something that was undiagnosed and not treated at the age of 5, 6,
Yeah,
7, 8. No
yeah,
fault of anybody,
right.
but I had to kind of let it out. Like I told her, let it out. It's okay to cry. Hit the
Yeah,
steering wheel and talk to myself and say, well, you're not there now. You're still living with it, but it's okay to cry and let it out. But got to keep on pushing through. Got to keep on pushing through. You got to keep on pushing through.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, yes, it's okay to cry.
yeah, yeah. I love that you say that. And it's funny how dyslexia, especially untreated dyslexia, stays with you. My own father was pretty dyslexic, and I was a teacher, and I was teaching dyslexic kids, and he came to visit the school, and I was showing him my smart board, and I was all
Mm,
excited, and I look over, and he's sitting at my desk in the classroom, and he's crying. I've
mhm.
never seen the man cry, and he's like in his 70s. So
Yeah,
it stayed with him. It stayed with him. And he
yeah,
was a medical doctor. Like, he was no
yeah,
dummy. He was
right.
super accomplished, but
Hmm.
it was still there. It was
It's still
still there.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I love that you're helping people with that. And I think it's fascinating. I think you said you've had clients you've recommended testing and they found out they were dyslexic.
Oh, it was just, it was so rewarding for me that they said, you know what, that's a possibility. And they went and got tested and they came back and they said, yes, that's what I'm living with. And we have now helping his wife to learn how to accommodate. I have to give him some coping skills that I would give anyone, but give him
Yep.
specific ways to manage life,
Yeah.
manage life. And so, yeah,
Well, and I know with young kids, and I'm assuming with adults too, when you hear it's dyslexia, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy and I'm not stupid. And it's
yeah,
this thing that I should have known about. It's almost like a relief to have a name
yes,
for it. Um,
mhm,
well,
yes,
good. God, Derrick, what an amazing story. And that you could go from being a challenged reader to not doing well in your SATs and struggling and now being able to get your PhD. That I know that's going to be an inspiration to so many people. So
yeah.
thank you so much for
You're
sharing
welcome.
your
Oh,
story. And
thank you.
yeah, it's fantastic. And next time I'm feeling sad, I'm calling you.
Come on and call me, Janet. You have my number.
I love it. I love it. Before I let you go, I just want to put a plug in for next week. We have these adorable teenagers, and they're going to be talking on Tuesday, at 7 p.m., Tuesday, November 12th, about their own experiences and how they advocate for themselves with teachers and, you know, different things that myths about dyslexia and how they handle it. So that's going to be neat. And then November's just the month. Wednesday the 20th, we will have Dr. Ryan Lee James of the Cox campus at Rollins Center, which is affiliated with the Atlanta Speech School. She's going to tell us all about the newly accredited Cox campus and their partnership with Georgia Department of Education. So, by the way, Cox campus is a free education for teachers who can learn about structured literacy and how to best teach reading. So, free is a good thing. So kudos to them, and we'll learn all about that. So, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're
I've
welcome.
loved
Thank
being
you.
with you, and I appreciate all your help.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was good. I enjoyed it. And hopefully someone can get something from what I share.
I think so. I don't see any questions, so I think we're good.